and welcome to Art Alive. This week we're at the Museum of Liverpool for the exhibition Poppies, Women in War, that looks at the impact of war on women around the world through compelling photographs, from portrait to botanical images of poppies. Karen Stowe, the artist behind the project, is an independent photojournalist. She has traveled to around 60 countries, documenting people and places for newspapers and magazines, such as The Times and CNN Traveller. Her long-term projects focus on contemporary women's issues. Lee, can you tell us a little bit, maybe, how did you start this project in the first place?
I've been working with women in Sierra Leone, West Africa, for many years, post-Civil War. And then, for personal reasons, actually my parents' health declined, so I had to stop travelling. I've been a photojournalist for many, many years, travelling to, around about 60 countries, I think. So I had to stop travelling to care for them, and my radius of the world shrank to 6 miles. So I found myself going out into the meadows, still photographing flowers and things, and obviously the red poppies each summer. And a colleague said, do you know that there is the centenary of the red poppy coming up? Do you know the history of it? And I said, no. And he said, look it up, you'll find it interesting, because of my work on women's issues. And I discovered that the poppy symbol that we wear each November, many of us wear, was founded by an American woman, and then a French woman, and then introduced to the British Legion as it was known at the turn of the century. And I found this fascinating because this is a woman we forget every November. We quite rightly remember the servicemen and women since World War I to the present day conflicts, but we forget that this woman worked so hard to get this poppy symbol established. And then I thought of how we forget many women in conflict and women as peacemakers. And I looked to the poppy flower itself as I was photographing it. I tried to learn more about the flower, and I discovered that it grows and survives where everything else has been destroyed. I mean, we knew that anyway. So it reminded me very much of the women I'd been working with, their spirit and their resilience, and that the poppy seed can stay dormant in the soil for decades, and only when there's great trauma, great upheaval, is the seed exposed to light, and then it grows, and it grows beautifully and strong, and we see it every summer. So I put these two together, I hope in a metaphorically way, and I use documentary images of the women who shared their stories with me, with fine art botanical images of the poppy flower in its natural environment. And because I couldn't cover women of every conflict, it's just impossible. That would take forever, sadly. The different colours of the poppy, the yellow, the orange, I'm hoping again a metaphor for women worldwide from all backgrounds, all faiths, caught up in conflict, who are forgotten.
And you were saying as well that it kind of come from personal background as well, this story. I mean, there's a sentence about your mom and
Yes, well, so when I think as soon as do you have an idea? I don't know. You have this story that you want to tell. Once you decide in your heart that this is a story I want to tell, you find that pathways are open to you. So the women actually, because I couldn't travel, I couldn't get on a plane again. I did go to Auschwitz, I did go to Flanders, and to Georgia, the home of Moina Bell-Michael. But the women seem to appear or come into my sphere actually with these stories. And I was chatting to my mother one day, and we were talking about women and war, and she said, oh, well, I remember. And I knew she'd been in the Second World War as a child, but it never registered. Mm-hmm. War is something we see on the television. It doesn't happen to our own mothers, but obviously, because I'd never asked, been too busy with other things. So I started asking, and then she started telling me these stories, and her memory was so vivid of that time, of hiding under the kitchen table, of being bombed for 4 years, a siege of the whole, because I think like Liverpool, port city, so it's very heavily bombed. And I said, you never told me this. And she said, well, you never asked. And also it's something that they didn't talk about after World War II. They just got on with their lives. And my mother wasn't evacuated, my father was, so he didn't experience any of this. And so I managed to record what she was telling me, and she died just recently. Both my parents died recently. But it just, for me, it personalises the whole, she'd not forgotten, but I'd forgotten to ask her. So many things we forget about women and war. And the conflicts are escalating. I don't want to get too political about it because I think people will make up their own minds about this exhibition, but women are still being forgotten daily, very much so. When I decided I wanted to do this, and it was going to be a 2-year project. It's now 4 years. I'm going to Hiroshima next week and Nagasaki to interview and photograph the female A-bomb survivors. It's 70 years on.
I was wondering if these photos were taken just for the project?
For the project, yes. Okay. Very much so. And there's a strong difference. I hope you can see it. The documentary images of the women are photo images. The images of the poppy flower are printed onto fine art paper, like a cotton type of paper, so the ink sits within, so it just gives them that very different feel. So it's a contrast, but which is stronger, but they're equally as strong.
And the women that we see, as we were saying, it's not women that have necessarily been part of the war, like in the army. It's women that,
yes, Holocaust survivors. Women of the Second World War, women of the First World War, who obviously I couldn't photograph them because they're not here anymore, their stories. So I had to find a conceptual image, if you like. Vera Brittain, the poppy seeds, the woman who founded Save the Children, women who are striving for peace, and that's where the project is going. It's evolving into, for 2018, the Women of Peace. The peace activists. So women have been affected in some way. I didn't choose to photograph. Well, what I didn't want to show was, I wanted to show women who are often forgotten, but not women as victims. Yeah. These women, very much like the poppy. The poppy is symbolic of the women and their stories. They've faced great upheaval, great trauma. Many, like Tracy, they've lost, and yet they're able to survive when everything has been destroyed. And just the resilience of these women, I hope, and the dignity of them, I hope is what comes across as well.
They've been doing so many things after what happened to them as well.
Yes. Yes.
Something else that struck me a bit as well, it's something that you've said, this is not an attempt to to hope for peace. What do you mean by this?
Well, since I began this project, let's say from 2007, look where we are now. There are so many more conflicts. I know one of the reasons I've been told that many people in Japan want to speak out about their memories of the atomic bombings is that the nuclear situation is changing. Yes, it wasn't an attempt to. I didn't want to make a shopping list of conflict to include every woman. There are not the peace women from Northern Ireland, for example. I did contact them, but I contact many women. Some came into the project. As an artist, you have a voice. This is the way I wanted to express the women I've met and the women whose stories I've learned who've been affected by war. The next stage is to meet more and more women who are striving for peace, who are working for peace. But dare to hope for peace? I do hope for peace. 6% of all submissions were women and girls at risk, the highest percentage in the last 6 years. So the number of refugees, female refugees and girls, is rising. So that tells you that war isn't going away, is it? I hope more and more people remember Moyna Bell-Michael and remember that women are very much forgotten. Will it change anything? I don't know.
Alongside the compelling photographs, a number of objects can be found on display, like the identity tags of Kingsman Jason Dunn Bridgman, who fought in Afghanistan as part of the 2nd Battalion of the Duke of Lancaster's regiment and was shot on foot patrol in Helmand Province. His mum, Tracy Dunn Bridgman, told us why she took part in the project.
I don't class myself as important. My son was who was important, and all the others that were out there, be the sons or daughters of people. So it's a way of educating people, and like I said, it's not about me. It's who stands behind me, which is my son. I didn't have the time that a lot of families sort of have before it happens, because Jason volunteered to go, so it was very short notice that he was going. So I didn't have all the preparation time that a lot of families have to deal with. It was, I'm going, and he flew out 4 days later. So it was pretty quick for me. So then it was just me at home, and you know, I had a lot of work going on in the house at the time, and telling workmen, if my son phones, you down tools, because I need to speak to my son, you know. So, and Jason left an impact on people that I didn't expect him, or I didn't even know that he knew. Or so it's important for people to, you know, to come and to see it and to think about what happens.
Portraits in the exhibition also include Colonel Debbie Talford, another Liverpool woman who's been affected by war. Colonel, can you tell us, first of all, why did you decide to take part in this exhibition, in this project?
I was approached by the museum because I am the commanding officer of a local field hospital, which is based here in Liverpool and made up of mostly reservists, clinicians who work in the NHS in their civilian roles. And the significant number of the unit personnel have deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq and other areas of conflict. So I was asked by Lee whether I would be willing to take part in the exhibition of Women in War because of my military service and my deployments to Afghanistan. And I'm proud to do that, and I think it's an incredible exhibition, not least of all because of the representation of women who are affected by conflict, not just military, civilians, women caught up in the conflict. But really, my contribution is about the testimony of the reservists, the clinicians who have gone into areas of conflict and made a difference to the lives of soldiers and civilians who have been badly injured.
Yeah, we think about the impact of war on women, but something I was thinking as well is the impact of having soldiers injured, for instance, and seeing them as well in hospitals, for instance, for women. I don't know.
Well, we did see women, of course, you know, so it's the majority of soldiers are male. That is because it is a male-dominant occupation. However, there were women who were injured, and that included not just military personnel, but civilians as well, mothers, Afghani mothers, Afghani children, females, males. So it really just put it into perspective for me that war affects everybody.
And you were telling me as well that you've been in the army for about 25 years?
Yes, almost 24 years, almost 25 years. I joined as a reservist because I was looking for an exciting opportunity. I wanted to do something different, but I also wanted to bring my skill set as a registered nurse. I've been a registered nurse for 34 years. I trained here in Liverpool in Broad Green Hospital, and I felt that I had a contribution to make. And my 2 deployments to Afghanistan have probably been the proudest moment in the whole of my clinical career.
Yeah, that must have been like something really tough as well, and not just as a woman, I mean.
It was tough because you were thousands of miles from home, away from family and friends, and working in a very austere environment, very challenging conditions, but absolutely part of a team that was totally committed and dedicated to giving the very best care that we could to the injured soldiers and civilians, to perhaps change what were unsurvivable injuries into survivable injuries. And we're seeing testimony to that, of the injured soldiers who still have fulfilling lives. And where we couldn't make that difference, and sadly there were occasions where we lost our soldiers and civilians, we provided dignity and compassion in death and returned their bodies to the families so that they could have the knowledge that the very best of care was delivered to try to save their loved ones.
What would you say the impact of war has been on you as a woman?
I think it's changed me for the better. I think it has tested me. It has made me look at life very differently. It has made me realise how precious life is. I am proud of my own achievements. I'm proud of my unit achievements. I'm proud of the soldiers that we cared for because they are just incredibly brave. But I think what it tells me is that we should continue to work for the world peace. That is primarily what we should all be working for, so that we're not faced with these conflicts in the future.
I was asking you, have you seen an evolution in the way women are in the army? I mean, the way they're looked at as well?
Yes, absolutely. I'm the first female and the first nurse to command my regiment, and it's an achievement I'm incredibly proud of. But it's a message to other women to say there is no such thing as a glass ceiling for women anymore. And I think the military have absolutely moved forward in spades to actually recognise the valuable contribution that women can make, and that we're on a parallel with our male colleagues. And I think there is a recognition that women do just as good a job as any male in any role. So that's a great news for women.
Poppies Women in War exhibition will run until spring next year. Next on Arts Alive, we'll go to Warrington for the exhibition Connections by Pauline Rigby, all about DNA. Join us after the break. Welcome back to Arts Alive. Until August 29th, Pyramid in Warrington displays Pauline Rigby's photographic exhibition Connections. The artworks explore the genetic connections between humans and animals. So, Pauline, can you tell us, we're here for the exhibition Connections, what is it about?
Well, my work's all about science and nature and biology, and I'm really interested in the scientific techniques and theories that are around at the moment and how they develop. And at the moment, DNA, genetics, the human genome is very, very topical, so it's very, very interesting.
Can you tell us how did it start in the beginning? I mean, how did you have this idea of working on DNA?
Well, this idea really started probably when I was at university. This is one of the sort of themes that I'm interested in, so it's just really a knock-on effect from there. And this I wanted to do really as a project for this exhibition, so I was just exploring all the possibilities and going through them.
So we have a selection of photos here. It's a mix of photography and digital photography. Yeah. Why did you want to mix the two of them?
Because photography itself, whether it's the old-fashioned style or the most modern style, we still need light to create that image. So even though like digital photography is like a really modern cutting edge, we still need that old-fashioned light to capture that image. So I wanted to combine the two.
Okay. And so all these images, we see a mix of person, but also with usually a face of animal. Can you explain us a little bit this?
Yeah, because with DNA, since we've had DNA for thousands of years, but since we've been able to explore that scientifically, it turns out that everything has got DNA, plants, animals, birds, even viruses, they've all got DNA, so we all have a portion of that DNA within us all, so we're all sort of connected by that DNA. Cyanotype is like a very old-fashioned photographic practice. It's one of the oldest photographic techniques, and it's actually made using two chemicals. You sensitise your paper with it and you expose it to light, and then the image develops. Now, originally they were used as they're called blueprints, and they were used for boat building as plans, for architects' plans, and all sorts of things like that. So I've tried to use the analogy of blueprints in photography with the DNA as being blueprints of humans and all sorts of other life on the planet.
Okay. And so when you worked on these images, I mean these cyanotypes, how did it work? I mean, you did that digitally, obviously. putting the head of animals and...
Yeah, the body, I wanted quite a straightforward body because I was looking at Victorian techniques as well. So I used the body, which is actually me as a model, and pictures that I had of animals and interacted them, measured them down.
And it's a quite an old technique of doing this. Do you think they would have done this kind of things before, like mixing body of an animal and the body of a person, for instance, or this is new?
Well, I don't know whether it's been done in cyanotypes, but the Victorians, which is one of my points of reference, they did a lot in taxidermy. So they use stuffed animals a lot, and I do know in some of them they created like hybrids from bits of stuffed animals. They did that, and they tried to say, oh, this is a new species and things like that, you know, and they were like curiosities as well.
Yeah. What I was looking at as well is that you were mentioning in history, for instance, Egyptian history, that was looking, maybe there's a link here as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, taking models like this, hybrid creatures, it's not anything particularly new. The ancient Egyptians, they had their gods. They had cat, lion-headed gods and so on. So now, the way things are going with science, it could be possible that we could be splitting cells and re-implanting them in other creatures. In fact, it's been done. We've got pigs' hearts and things like that, you know, for medical purposes. So there's, it is a recurring theme, and one of the oldest hybrid creatures is a little statue called the lion man or lioness, and it's about 30,000 years old, and that's been found in a cave.
So what would you say is the message behind all of this work? I mean, obviously it's connections between...
Well, I'd like people, well, obviously I want people to like them, but I'd like people to think about the fact that we've got this DNA, this organic matter in us all, and that if we've got it and animals and plants have got it, just to try and think that we are in fact connected by this to some degree or another, and just really think about planet as a whole.
How would you describe your work then? I mean, is it the kind of work that you do usually as well?
Yes, this is the sort of thing I'm interested in. So it's like a mix of contemporary photography and older style photographies. I like those old techniques, and mixing them, exploring scientific theories and boundaries, and hopefully to try and create a slightly disconcerting image as well.
Okay. And what are you working on at the moment, apart from the exhibition? What is your next project after this?
My next project is going to be some line drawings. I'm going back to my drawing now, so I'm doing some line drawings.
Okay. Can you tell us maybe more about this, or do you have a subject, a theme behind it as well? Or?
Well, possibly it's going to be Alice in Wonderland as a theme, so, because Lewis Carroll did anthropomorphic creatures a bit like this, so I'm going to go down that route now.
Great, that sounds nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all this week on Arts Alive. See you next time.